Okay, let's get started. Of course, we organize. My name is Koole. Welcome, everybody. Uh, and I still see people coming in, but let's not wait any longer. Let's get started. Welcome again. Um, as you probably know, we're organizing this webinar series every month or so. We organize a webinar. Um, So sometimes we have 40 or 50 participants. Right now we're approaching 20, so a bit less than usual. Although I do think this is, well, I find this personally an interesting subject. And it was for one of the first calculators we worked on was about blending. So I really think, well, I personally find it an interesting subject, and I hope you do too. Welcome everybody who is joining. I just started, so please, as I said, this meeting is recorded. So we'll post it on our website, this webinar, so you can look at it afterwards. But be aware that if you say something, that things are recorded. Of course, in the end, there's lots of room for questions. And you can also post things in the chat, and you can always plan a meeting with us at some other moment. Welcome everybody who is still joining. Good to see that you're here. Okay, let's get started. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about blending, of course. But before, I want to share our long-term vision on workforce management with you. Then we go into, well, advantages, disadvantages of blending, how we think that blending should be done in a smart way to avoid most of the disadvantages. But before we do so, I'm interested to know if you do multi-channel operations and blending. Of course, I'll introduce blending in a few slides, but I guess most of you know what it means. It means that you have multiple communication channels, for example, inbound and email, and that agents and during, let's say, an hour might do an inbound call and then an email, etc. So I'm interested in what if you're using it. So I created a poll, and I hope you can see it right now. And please, well, let us know what if you're using it and how you're using it. Okay, I see some answers coming in. Yeah, so the first option is no, we don't using it, considering it, and then if you use it in some way, how you do it. Okay, I see about, yeah. Of course, many call centers nowadays, well, are actually contact centers. We're using multiple channels, so I see nobody who is not using any form of multi-channel operations, or very few. And let me publish the outcomes to see what you voted. So I hope you can see that. So most of you have multi-channel agent, but you're always operating in a single mode. So 1 or a few hours inbound, and then sometime, yeah, I mean, there are different words for it. But I see somebody say, is this the same as concurrency? What I mean by blending is that, well, of course, you're not doing it really at the same time, but you're doing an inbound call, then perhaps an email, and then a new inbound call gets pushed to the agent, and this way, etc. What you often see, and that is, I find not surprising, is people use blending, but then service level is not as expected, or something else goes wrong. And so then you make manual adaptations to it. and that is indeed something we're going to talk about. And so that's important. You want to minimize these manual changes, and of course, you want your blending to go well. So that will be the main focus of this webinar. Okay, thanks for your answers. So as I said, we'll share with our vision of WM, our CCmath vision. What are we working towards? Of course, in call centers, you have certain problems that, for example, real-time managers face. For example, which type of agent do I need? Should I remove a certain skill from an agent to favorize another skill because the service level is too low? Well, these problems on what to do are extremely difficult problems, because one action might have one might give rise to a chain of events that really give, in a certain way, unexpected outcomes. And these are multidimensional problems, and I mean by that you have multiple dimensions, multiple skills. So changing an agent on one or two skills might have consequences to a skill that agent doesn't have at all. Yes, and so these, mathematically speaking, high-dimensional problems are very difficult to comprehend. So what we try to deliver, we try to assist the decision maker with tooling, and sometimes it's really automated, and sometimes it gives advice. So the level of interaction with the decision maker, with the planner, depends on the application. But we try to build intelligence into our WFN tooling that really helps the human decision making in coming up with good solutions to these very difficult problems. So the advantage is that solution is better, or as people often say, more optimal. Yeah, so all the stakeholders benefit in the sense that service levels are better, occupancy is higher, and hopefully also agents are more satisfied. That is more fair among the agents, for example. Another advantage is if you implement it in software. Of course, that's, well, a time-consuming job, but once it's in the software, all the users of the software can use it, so you don't have to train or these users don't have to learn it all. Yeah, so that is the advantage, that the knowledge is in the tooling, which is, once it's there, it's easily distributed. It's of course way faster. Automatic decision making is instantaneous. While if a planner has to make decision, there's delay, and because you built it once and then it's relatively easy to distribute, it's of course cheaper than when everybody has to learn the manual task. So of course we try to make a nice user-friendly tooling, but we also have one of the key things, one of our USPs, is that we really try to build this intelligence in our tooling. So that is our big vision, and today what I want to show how we try to do that in blending. Of course, many of you you probably all know what blending is, but with blending, we mean that you really blend real-time different channels. Most of the cases you see inbound with email or perhaps outbound calls. We also see sometimes customers who blend, for example, inbound with other channels, with chat, or chat with email. So you can think of it. But most of the time we will look at blending one channel that requires a short response time, so a direct channel, as some people call it, inbound or chat that typically needs to be answered within, say, 20 seconds, and sometimes and another channel that has a required response time, time to answer of, let's say, multiple hours or even days, as is the case in email. So why would you like to do that? Well, in preparation of this of this webinar, I made some calculations, and here you see a graph that I made in Excel. And what you see here is the number of calls if you have sufficient number of agents, but this is the number of calls that are present, that are being dealt with in a particular call center. Yes, and what I did, I assumed this is 1 hour that you see, and I took 300 calls during that hour. Actually, a forecast of 300. I think it's a bit less, but that is randomness. So that means 5 calls on average per minute, and I took an average handling time, which is also approximately 5 minutes. And what is surprising here is, of course, that you see these fluctuations going on. And if I would repeat this is a simulation that I made myself. This is synthetic data, but this is typically what you see in a call center. Yeah? So 1 hour, the forecast for every 50 minutes, let's say, is the same, but these are typical fluctuations. And when I repeat this same process, when I do the simulation again, you will see, well, something that also fluctuates, but of course, the valleys and the peaks are at different locations. Now, if you look at that, so 5 calls on average per minute, an average handling time of 5 minutes, then the offered net workload is 25 units, 25 Erlang, yes, as it's called in telecom. Yeah, so and the average of, if you take this blue line and you take the average, then you get to 25. Yeah, so that is the workload. Now these are inbound calls. Of course, if I want to have a decent service level, then I shouldn't schedule 25 agents. Then I should schedule a bit higher. So I used an algorithm. I used our Erlang X algorithm. But if perhaps you're familiar with Erlang C, then you get a bit different result. But you use your favorite safety staffing algorithm to get your gross workload. And in this case, we got 30 agents. So this red line here, that is the staffing level. And of course, what you see, you have the valleys and the peaks. In the valleys, you're overstaffed and you have idleness. So you pay your agents, well, just to wait for calls. And you have, at certain moments, there are more calls in the system than there are agents. So that means that these calls that are above the red line, they have to wait and they get handled in the next valley. So there's understaffing and waiting, and there's not so much understaffing here. So probably will be an acceptable service level, but it also depends a bit on the randomness. But this is, I think, this is around 85% service level. And now, if you have a fully inbound call center and there's no flexibility with breaks or anything, well, this is the situation that you have to deal with. Yes, and this talk, this webinar is of course about blending. So how can we mitigate the disadvantages of what we see here, that in certain moments you have idleness and in other moments you have waiting and perhaps long waiting times. How can we reduce these by the use of blending? Okay, let's first do blending in a simple way. Yes. Okay. Now, suppose we have a call center, so you have some work, typically emails, that you can that are non-time constrained. So you can shift them around a bit. You have at least a couple of hours to help them. Perhaps you have a large pool of emails to be done during the day. And then, of course, there are 2 options. And one option is what most of you answered in the poll a second ago. You have multi-channel agents, but they always operate in a single channel mode. And this is the situation that is depicted here. So we have these 30 agents. that we just saw that are required to reach the service level. And next to that, let's say, assume this is not a necessity, but for simplicity, assume that the average handling time on your emails that are this small cloud, that is your email cloud, let's say, 5 minutes handling time, you have 5 agents doing emails. Yes? Now suppose we're going to use blending. How many agents do you need? Well, actually, 30. And why? And this is a naive way, and I'll tell you about the disadvantage. But if you look at it at first sight, you think, hey, I need 30 agents. Because if I look at the inbound here, I have a net load of 5 times 5 is work for, on average, 25 agents. Yes? So on average, of these 30 agents here, 5 are not active. Yes, you need them because of the valleys and the peak of the previous slides to work away backlogs. But why not let them work on emails, these agents, if there are no calls? Hey, but on average, 5 of them are not working. So that means that on average, 5 can work on email. So I only need 30 agents. Yes. And then, of course, when a call arrives and an agent is working on an email, then I can interrupt the email and have this call work and have this agent work on this inbound call. Yes. And then to the inbound calls, it's just like the emails are not there, they are interrupted. And when there's no work, they pick up the email again. And on average, 5 people are working on emails. So that sounds like the ideal situation, 100% occupancy and the same service level as here, but 5 agents less. Of course, this is not really how it works. Yes. And the most important reason is that, well, here I said it, agents don't like to be interrupted when they're doing emails, but also when they're interrupted, it takes some time to switch, etc. But also the average handling time goes up. Because if you get interrupted 5 times while doing an email, you have to start working on that email again and again. So that is, they're dissatisfied. And of course, they need to, think about it. They even perhaps need to change in their IT system certain things because they can only handle one file at a time. Well, lots of problems. So they don't want it. Yeah? Okay, then you say, let's not interrupt the emails. But then actually, because you have 100% occupancy, every arriving call will find that all the agents are occupied. And actually, you will have a very bad service level. Yes. So what happens in practice, and I guess that is what some of you mean when you say we use blending, but we need to do multiple manual changes. So what you see often in practice, and what we see often, is that, well, okay, the real-time manager sees that the service level is not as required, and then you have some of these multi-channel agents, and you say to these agents, of course, you enter it in the system, that they can only receive inbound call. And that way you increase the service level on the inbound calls. But what are the disadvantages of that? Of course, this is a manual interruption. And when I talked about vision, I think that you should try to do these things, not manually, but automatically. But in the first hand, well, you were doing blending for a reason. And now you're reducing the number of agents that can do the blending. So you're reducing the disadvantages. Of course, these agents who do only inbound will have more idleness than the other agents. And that also has the additional disadvantage that it's unfair between the agents. Some are in blended mode and have a high occupancy, others, they don't. So that is something that agents, for good reason, dislike, and that's unfair. So the question is, how can you do this in a smarter way? Yes, how to control the system in such a way that you reach your service level, that you do not interrupt all these emails, and and that you still have a reduction in number of agents compared to really doing it separately. And well, this is this idea of blending with a threshold, where what I would call a smart way of blending. It's also a way of keeping capacity available for the inbound call, but in a different way than what is done in real-time management. And that is by using a threshold. And what I mean by a threshold is that that's a number, and we'll see some examples, but that is the number of agents that we try to keep free for inbound calls. Yeah? So, and here are some simple examples. Let's assume this threshold is 2, can be different numbers, and it actually needs to be calculated. But as an example, let's use this situation. So you have these inbound calls entering a queue, which is currently empty. You have 30 agents again. And but now they're all in blended mode, and 29 of these agents are occupied. That can be either with inbound calls or emails, but we don't interrupt them. And there's one free agent. Now suppose that an inbound call arrives. I hope you can read it. It's a bit small, but there's an arrival of an inbound call. Then always, if there's an inbound call and there are free agents, then you give priority to that because they are time constrained. You want to meet the service level. So then this call goes to the free agent. But what can also happen is that an agent gets available. Out of these 29, one of these calls or email is finished, and the agent becomes available. Now this threshold level is 2, meaning you want to have as much as most of the time, as much as possible, you want to have 2 free agents. That means that this agent, there's no call here, that this agent doesn't get an email. No, you keep that agent available for potentially arriving inbound calls, yes? Because you're not at the threshold yet. But now we have 2 agents available. Yes. Again, if an arrival occurs, then that goes to, well, the longest available free agent. But now suppose that another agent gets available. Yes, because one of the 28 calls or emails finishes. Yes. Then there are 3 available agents. And in that situation, you push an email to the longest available agent. Yeah? And to try to keep always 2 agents available. Not always possible. When multiple inbound calls come in, then it happens. But when the availability gets above the threshold level, then you start doing emails. And what is the consequence of that? Well, we have a calculator online at our webpage that you can use. But here I have some examples what that means. So, and with that, I hope to convince you, if you're not at what the added value is of blending. So here we have again this situation. So we have these 30 agents that we need to have a great service level. We have 5 agents working on outbound, so they are separated. And what this means, actually, perhaps 29 would be fine for 80%, but I took 30. And then actually you have a great service level, 87% within 20 seconds. And of course, if you have 5 agents working continuously on emails, shrinkage and everything is left aside. But if you have 5 emails, 5 people working on emails that each take 5 minutes, well, on average, then you finish these 5 together, they finish 1 email per minute. So that is the throughput on, or output, whatever you want to call it, on email. Now let's do the blending. And that actually is a more complicated calculation. And as I said quite some time ago, we did these calculations. So these are extensions of Erlang calculations. The very basic one is Erlang C, but you can build on similar ideas and and go into the Erlang X direction or more in blending. There are multiple ways to do it. Of course, if you are a mathematician, you could dive into the mathematics, but here we're talking about how that can help you when you're operating a call center. So let's first do this naive way of doing things. And the naive way is that you do not have a threshold, and actually a threshold value of 0. Yes, meaning that you do not try to reserve agents for the inbound. So these 30 plus 5, 35 together, they are in blended mode. And well, the bad news is now you have a bad service level, because as soon as one agent is available, then this agent does an email. You produce way more emails because you have a load of 25, you have 35 agents, so you have on average 10 agents doing emails. So you're doing great on the emails, twice as much, but you have a bad service level. Yes. So this type of situation in many call centers, what people do is they will manually say to some of these agents, okay, you do only inbound, because the service level is bad, and perhaps with priority to balance a bit the occupancies. But you can also do this idea of a threshold. And in this case, the threshold level, a good threshold level is 4 to get a similar service level. So in this situation, if you still have these 35 agents, in a second, we're going to reduce the number of agents. Now, so you need a threshold level of 4. You always try to keep 4 agents, 3 for inbound. But what is important here that these agents that circulates, it's not always the same agent. These are different agents, and that makes it fair between the agents. They have similar occupancies because, well, it circulates. Yes, but here, if you have a threshold level of 4, you have the same service level as here, but actually you have an output on your outbound, which is way higher than this one, because on average, of course, you try to keep some of the agents free, but they're on average, they are more occupied on emails than the 5 in this situation when it's separate. So actually, you have a higher output on the email and a similar service level. Now, if you say that, okay, perhaps you don't have that many emails, perhaps you want to achieve 1 email per minute, but have this service level. I also did some calculations and won't go in all the details. You can verify it yourself online with our calculators. But if you want to have a similar output as here, so actually, well, it's not exactly 87, but it's 86, but has similar output on the outbound, then you need a different threshold level, but it suffices to have 33 agents. Yeah? So in total, you save 2 agents, you get the same output as here. Yes, and I said you can we have the blending calculator on our website. There you can reproduce all these numbers. Yes, and if you need help with that, or contact us, and we'll help you. And we'll explain things, and we'll help you model your own situation. And actually, there are some additional disadvantages. And those of you who were also at our previous webinar about multi-scale operations, you might recognize some of these. One of the nice things of working in such a blended mode, of course, this forecast of 5, the whole idea behind blending is what I showed with the graph with the fluctuation, is that it automatically, well, mitigates the impact of these fluctuations. So that is the nice thing about this blending. But sometimes it's not about fluctuations. Sometimes you have structurally more or less traffic because you make a forecasting error. And you always make forecasting errors. The question is not, do I make a forecasting error? And the question is, how big is my forecasting error? And if you make a forecasting error, then automatically the time that the agent spends on inbound or email shifts with the volume. Yes, so that is one of the additional advantages. So it's robust under forecasting errors. Actually, also robust under changes. If one agent is ill, yes, and or for whatever reason, if your shrinkage is not as expected, and also shrinkage has, of course, fluctuations, and depending on and when agents take breaks or perhaps other things, meetings that get canceled, or other reasons. So it's also robust on the changes in your capacity in the number of agents. What you can depends on the system. I didn't talk about the routing system that does that has to support this. But there are certain systems in which you can say, well, an email is allowed to be interrupted, for example, once. And that makes the agents a bit more flexible. Then the threshold level can be a bit reduced. And perhaps it's acceptable for the agents to be interrupted, well, once or perhaps twice during an email. That's up to, how you prefer to manage the system, and depends also probably on the type of work that you have. In many situations, you have some agents who are good at doing inbound and email, but you always have agents that are not good in writing responses, and others that for some reason can only do email. Yes, so you can have some agents that only have one channel. That's all possible, as long as these numbers are not too big. The impact is relatively limited. And a nice thing, and that corresponds to the vision that I showed on one of the first slides. You need less real-time management. It's automatic. How work is assigned, and you do not have to change manually the channels that agents are handling. Of course, essential. Of course, we can do the planning, and we have the tooling for that also in this online calculator. But it needs also to be implemented in the routing platform, and that is something. Well, depends a bit on the routing platform, but that is something that of course needs to be done. Others, you can do the planning for something very smart, but if you don't do it in reality, and then you probably understaff. So it should be in your routing platform. So to wrap up, what is my conclusion? And I'm also interested in hearing your feedback. But if you do the blending, as I just explained, that both increases occupancy and service level, it decreases the need for manual interventions. Well, and the additional advantages that I already mentioned. And as I said, it's you can try it online. We have these calculators online. But it's also part of our, that is all part of our add-in that you can use in Excel and other tooling such as Python. So if you're interested, you can contact us or find more information on our website. Okay, we're almost at the end. I hope that these ideas behind blending and how you mitigate the effect of the fluctuations, that was clear, because it's really about the underlying ideas, and then how to handle these, how to decrease the effects of it. If you're interested to learn further about it, of course, you're very welcome to try the calculators on our website, to go have a look at this and other webinars. In a few days, it will be online. So if certain things were not clear, you can look back or refer a colleague to it if you think that's interested. If you're interested in a demo or more about a tooling, just contact Jesper, our marketeer, who's in this call here. If you want some, who's actually right in front of me. If you want to advise on this tool or other tooling, if you have more technical questions, Bas, who's also in this call, or myself, or together, we're very happy to well, have a virtual coffee with you and to chat for half an hour or an hour about your challenges. So just send us an email, and we're very happy to book a moment. And I'm very happy to announce our next webinar, which is on July the 9th. So that's well, for some people probably already in the holiday season, but we have we are finishing a new version of our scheduling tool, and CC Schedule, and Wout will give we'll talk about well, the features of that tool on July 9th. So I'm very happy to announce that. Okay, thank you very much for joining today. Thanks for your attention, and of course, feel free to leave. And I see some people well, say that it was interesting and informative. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm going to have a look at that if there are any questions yet. But yeah. I see somebody, Alexander. We have a problem to blend inbound and chats. Yeah, inbound and chats. I understand that is difficult because they are both time constraints, and so it's not. So that is a difference. So I can. Would be interesting to think about that. I can imagine that in certain smaller call centers you want to do that, but yeah, I can understand that it's difficult. Another question, Dominique, how does the blending work if you have yeah, I had this example. I did 300. Yeah, so that is, Dominique, the numbers that you have are comparable to the examples that I have. So that is so that was an example with 5 calls per minute. So that's 300 per hour. So I guess that is similar. It depends also on the handling times, of course. 330 seats occupied. Yeah. Yeah, you should really compare the different scenarios and look at the advantages, and then of course try it out in the sense that do you see that can all agents handle that? Do your IT systems allow for that? But it sounds like a good case. Yeah. So please try our calculators and compare the different scenarios. And of course see how to implement that in your routing system. But it looks like an interesting case to try it out. Okay. Thank you. And again, if you need any help or if you have any questions about our tooling, about our our add-in or anything else, please let us know. Okay, I think we're at the end of this webinar. Again, there is, or our clients want to blend inbound and chats. Chats are better at, yeah. Yeah, chats, of course, you cannot interrupt them. They want to blend inbound and chats. Well, the thing is, of course, you can do that. And I know some call centers who do that. But we don't have a calculator for that. The thing is, if your concurrency level is 3 for your chat, then you should try to keep agents available for the inbound. So those who are handling chats, they should all have the maximum concurrency. That's important. So you should spread out the chats. You should, and then the number of agents doing inbound. Yeah. Good question. Whether you should open or Yeah, it depends a bit of the what are your service level requirements. Sometimes you see it, you have a pool of agents, but they're serving multiple. Yeah, that's well. We can have a further chat about that, but it also depends on are the service levels the same, yes or no. Is inbound 80-20 and perhaps chat is perhaps 60 or 20 or 80-60 or something. And that might be might make a difference. And that whether you give priority to an inbound call or chat. Perhaps it depends also on how fast they abandon. So that might also play a role. Yeah? Your service level, but if you want to talk further about that, Alexander, we can schedule something. Yeah, your service level will, yeah. Yes, I agree what you say about service level, and I think that time to abandonment, when we talk about Erlang X, and also that is how quickly do people abandon, and there will definitely be a difference between customers for chat and customers for inbound calls. So. And we have some also some webinars on the patience of how long customers are willing to wait. So that might also be an interesting aspect of that. Yes. So but I agree that also your service level requirement will dictate your priority. I agree. Okay. If there are no more questions, again, thanks very much for joining. Have a nice rest of the day, and hope to see you at some future occasion. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.